Welcome to In the Stu. I am your host for today, Dennis Landry. Welcomed by my very good buddy here, Eliza Reyes. We are also being joined by a special guest in the Stu today, Mr. George Ofman. How are you doing today, George?
I'm warm too. Oh. It's fabulous. It's nice to see the sun out in Chicago, isn't it?
Absolutely, especially after all that cold the past week, the snow, it just brings you down. But we're out here and we have good energy, good vibes, and a very good analyst and journalist that you have been for the past 48 years.
You had to get there, didn't you?
I had to
go to 48. Okay.
You know what? That is impressive to me, right? That is because this is the field that I'm driving towards at this particular point in time, and I'm very passionate and hungry for it. And to see someone with so much veteran experience, so much just pizzazz and award-winning pizzazz, you know, it's amazing to be sitting here right next to you and asking you questions for this interview today.
Well, I'm ready to go. Whatever you ask, I'm ready to answer.
Okay, well, I wanted to just preface the first question off with 3-time AP award winning, 2 Silver Dome Awards, Air Award winner, and you got the critically acclaimed podcast, Tell Me a Story I Don't Know, right? It's what drove you towards the world of sports media, first and foremost?
Well, that started when I was a kid, which is pretty much going to be anybody who does this for a living, started when they were a kid.
Absolutely.
So I grew up in Albany Park in the Chicago area, and you know, I was a sports fan like anybody else. I had 2 older brothers, probably started watching games when I was 6. And we had a group of kids that would come out, and we would play in the summer. We would play rubber baseball, okay? And sometimes there'd be 20 kids. Sometimes there'd be 10. I played, but I was also the announcer. I was Jack Brickhouse, who was for many years the longtime voice of the Chicago Cubs, but he also did the White Sox, the Bears, he did the Bulls, he did the Sting, he did everything. So he was the standard bearer for many years as we were growing up. And so I would take a soda can or a pop can, and after the game I would interview the players, my friends, and it started there. And eventually it led me to Southern Illinois University, which had the best radio television school in the Midwest. Actually, it was considered second to Syracuse, which has always been the best in the country. And I set my sights on doing this for a living. And so within 6 months, I was named the sports director. I had tremendous responsibility. Suddenly, I had to pick out a staff of 30 people, you know, and I'm, whatever I was, 20 years old then. It was a great pleasure, a passion. I was doing play-by-play, I was doing television, I was doing radio, and then when I was done with school, then I had to figure out, where am I going to get a job? Well, I got lucky. Maybe 6 months after I got out of school, I did send some tapes. I sent some television tapes to places, and, as you can well tell, I have a great face for radio. And they, one place said, yes, and that was it was off an Indian reservation in Nebraska. I said, no, I don't want to go there. Thanks. The sports phone came up. What is sports phone? Sports phone began in 1978 in New York, and then 1976, 1977 in Chicago. It was a telephone sports service in which we would give scores every 10 minutes. It was mostly for gamblers. That's how gamblers would gamble. They would find out the scores from us. Well, it turns out that it was a beginning, a start-off point for a whole lot of people in our business. I can't rattle all of them off, but Jeff Joniak, the voice of the Bears, Luke Canellis, Channel 32, David Schuster, who was a longtime radio guy here, Chris Bowden, all of these people who are here. In New York, Gary Cohn, the voice of the Mets, everybody started at Sports Phone. And for me, that was a fabulous way to begin a career because In 1979, I got fired for leaving a game because I got bored with Sports Phone, but I'd already begun a freelance career in radio. And I had that for 13 years. I was my own boss. I had a whole bunch of radio clients because in that day and age, there was a lot of radio sports all over the country, in Canada, in London. I made a business out of it. I was writing for National Public Radio's morning edition. I was on the air for them for 20 years. So that mushroomed into giving me credibility in my market. And eventually, I was able to get on the air. It took me a while. I think it was 1987. A Hall of Fame guy named Red Motlow, a longtime sportscaster in Chicago, allowed me to do vacation time for him. And that led me to WMAQ All News, which was a competitor for WBBM News Radio. And they hired me, and then 3 years later, I landed as one of the originals at the Score Radio. This after turning down a really, really great offer to do sports talk radio in Toronto. And it was a real tough decision. But from there, I was at the Score, 1992, was there for 17 years, a little 6-month time off, and then wound up at WGN Radio, where I was lucky enough to be sent to the Stanley Cup Finals Game 6 in Philadelphia, where I saw I saw Patrick Kane's goal, only I saw it from the lobby because since I was with the broadcast team, I was on the bench within 30 seconds of his goal. So you can imagine what it's like to be on the bench watching the Blackhawks hurl a Stanley Cup. Okay, they're holding a Stanley Cup like 5 feet from me. I grew up with this team that hadn't won a Stanley Cup since 1961.
So I can catch you in some of the pictures then, right?
Yeah, I'm somewhere around there. You never know. And then I wound up at WBBM for 10 years. So it's been a great long run that has continued now with my podcast.
And I would like to ask you this: that extensive history is amazing. What were the biggest challenges that you came across from beginning to the end? The biggest challenges.
Well, I think the biggest challenge probably was to establish yourself in a marketplace, my home. As soon as I started in college, the way I looked at it was, you want to be like a pro, you act like a pro, and you work really hard at it. So I have no problem with the work ethic. And when it came to freelancing and coming to a lot of games, mind you, I had a lot of people see me. I went to a whole lot of White Sox games, Cubs games, Bears games, Bulls games, Blackhawks. I started traveling and doing the Milwaukee Brewers. I would go to events where I thought I could make money. This is part of the business. So I would travel to Detroit and cover a big hockey game or something. And because that was the challenge was, A, getting people to recognize me. The next challenge was, how do I get on Chicago radio full time? That was really crucial. In the meantime, I was making a pretty good living doing this, and the people who were on Chicago radio were making half the money I was making. I said, well, I kind of like my life right now. You know, it's really cool. I'm single. I'm my own boss. I'm having a good time. I'm working hard. I'm playing hard. So let's keep it going. But there comes a time where you want to do that. That's where Red Motlow came in. When he gave me the break, people started hearing me on the air. And then that challenge was, somebody hire me. And finally that happened, and I've been doing it ever since.
That is beautiful. So would you say, was that like your peak in your career, the main takeoff would be that break that they gave you?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think the break is I gave it to myself. The break actually happened when I was doing, somebody told me, you can sell some of your sound. I didn't know this. You could sell some of your sound, and you could do these stories if you want. Back then, to do that, we used to transmit all of our stuff on a telephone. Okay, this was a telephone. You held it, it had a handle and everything. And what you did was, to transmit your stuff, you would unscrew the receiver, and there would be 2 clips. And you would have a piece of equipment called alligator clips, or later on something called a voice act, which you would screw back on, and that way they could hear you speak. There would be a male-to-male cord you could put into your recorder that went into the phone, and that way they can hear your tape. And then you could do what was called wraparounds. You could talk, and now this is what this guy said, and you could press your button on your recorder, and they could hear the sound. And from there, I came to realize that I was in control, and I had my own business going, and I was able to really get a lot of clients to believe in my work, which was good, because then they would keep calling me, and that way I made a living. So, but my big break was finding out I could do that, and when I started doing it, I made my own way. Everybody that does this in this business, however the business is today, finds a way to make their own way. That's what you've got to do. It doesn't mean you're going to be an independent, but you've got to find a way to make your own way.
Oh, I love that you mentioned that, because that's very true. Mm-hmm. So that's why it also brings me. You said you attended SIU. So you said it was the second at the time. So what kept you from going to the first? And on top of that, you said how you gave me this picture when you talked about your childhood. You gave me like the Sandlot vibes. Mm-hmm. So that's what it kind of just reminded me of, which made me love it even more. Yeah. So how has SIU, what was that step that they gave you that put you out there even more, that made your path a little more open to go ahead in the field?
Well, that was me wanting to work. When I walked into a newsroom in January of 1974, I saw that newsroom and I fell in love with it. I said, this is really where I want to be. And then I started working really hard. And even when you're in college, you're working weekends. You're working weekend nights because you are covering all these basketball and high school basketball and high school football. Some of those trips were 25, 30 miles away in little towns, really rabid little towns in southern Illinois. Well, I kept doing that and doing it a lot, and got to the point where they named me the sports director. That didn't matter. I was still doing all of that work, still doing my television work while I was being a young boss. And that worked. And because of that, SIU gave me a lot. It not only gave me the ability to learn my craft, but it allowed me to become an adult. I learned 4 years of knowledge, and I had 4 years of great growth as a person. So that when I got out of school, and I was a little older, I was 23, it at least gave me the ability to understand who I was. After that, the challenge was finding work.
I can imagine. I think that's one thing we all may struggle in, for sure.
Finding work, indeed. Actually, as I mentioned before, I just finished up school myself. Mm-hmm. So I'm in that rough period of finding work and finding my way within the sports broadcasting world. Now, right now, I want to actually take a break. But when we come back, I want to discuss your podcast and see what your knowledge on sports look like, too, as well. We'll be right back after this.